In the vastness of space, humanity had long grown accustomed to the endless stretch of stars, planets, and mysteries that seemed almost infinite. Generations of explorers had ventured beyond the solar system, establishing colonies, research stations, and outposts on distant planets, each with its own unique challenges. Earth, now an advanced interstellar hub, had learned to watch, record, and sometimes intervene in, but always cautiously. Humans had grown skilled at navigating the delicate balance of contact with alien species. Some civilizations were peaceful, some dangerous, and some so fragile that even the slightest interference could be catastrophic. Over the decades, humans developed the ability to detect faint signals from distant worlds. Sometimes years after the message had been sent, one such faint signal was about to change everything humanity thought it knew about compassion, risk, and the power of unity across species. The message had traveled for centuries across the void, bouncing through natural cosmic relays and primitive communication satellites. It arrived at a small monitoring station on the edge of the Milky Way, where a team of human scientists scanned deep space frequencies for unusual activity. At first it seemed like nothing more than background noise, a garbled mix of signals distorted by distance and cosmic interference. But as the scientists enhanced the signal, patterns began to emerge, patterns that indicated intelligence, urgency, and desperation. The message was simple, almost pleading. Its meaning became clearer as algorithms translated the alien language into something humans could understand, a call for help. The species behind the plea were not strong, not technologically advanced, and not accustomed to the harshness of space or the ferocity of the natural threats on their planet. Their world was called, by human researchers, a death world. Unlike the temperate and relatively forgiving planets humans had colonized, this planet's surface was an ever-changing battlefield. Massive storms could sweep across its continents. Without warning, burying forests and cities under layers of debris, invasive predators roamed freely, capable of killing even the most cautious inhabitants. Natural disasters were constant, from earthquakes that split the land to toxic gas eruptions that made entire regions uninhabitable. Despite all these challenges, the Deathworlders had survived for countless generations, developing cunning strategies, small but durable settlements, and intricate social structures designed purely for survival. They had thrived, against all odds, in a world that seemed determined to destroy them. But this time, survival was no longer possible alone. The threat they faced was larger, more organized, and faster than anything they had seen before. Their environment, already dangerous, was changing at a pace they could not handle. Crops failed despite careful cultivation. Disease spread faster than their medical knowledge could manage. And predators adapted in ways that outpaced the Deathworlders' defensive tactics. In desperation, they sent a message into space, hoping perhaps, against reason, that some distant, powerful species would notice and respond. They had no guarantee of help, no assurance that anyone would even understand them. Yet they tried anyway, knowing that without intervention, their civilization might vanish entirely. The humans who received the message were astonished. On one level, it was a routine scientific discovery. Signals from distant worlds were detected frequently, but on another, it was extraordinary. Few messages had ever carried such unmistakable urgency, and fewer still had originated from a species facing immediate extinction. The scientists gathered in the main observation hall, surrounded by banks of monitors, holographic displays, and mapping systems showing the position of the Death World across thousands of light years. They could see the planet as a distant blue-green sphere, rotating slowly, scarred by violent weather patterns and visible signs of environmental decay. It was beautiful in a haunting, dangerous way. The world seemed alive, almost sentient, as if it itself were crying out for help alongside its inhabitants. The team debated the credibility of the message. Could it be a natural phenomenon mimicking intelligence? Could it be a trap or a test from a more advanced civilization? The questions were endless, but the evidence kept pointing in one direction. This was real. The alien species was intelligent, sentient, and desperate. They had survived millennia of hostile conditions, yet now, facing a threat beyond their control, they had no choice but to reach out. The fact that they had succeeded in transmitting a message across such immense distances was itself a testament to their ingenuity, their persistence, and their will to survive. While the scientists prepared a detailed report for Earth's Interstellar Council, news of the signal spread quickly across research networks and diplomatic channels. Discussions erupted about the implications. Some argued that humanity had a moral responsibility to help. After all, if humans possessed the technology to intervene and prevent an entire civilization from vanishing, could they stand idly by and do nothing? Others countered with caution, pointing to historical examples where contact with weaker civilizations that had led to unintended destruction, even extinction. The moral dilemma was complicated by the practical dangers. The Death World was inhospitable, even for advanced human technology. Any attempt to send aid would require careful planning, significant resources, and a fleet capable of withstanding extreme environmental hazards. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders continued their struggle, unaware that their plea had reached alien ears. Their society was a tapestry of small communities, each specialized in surviving a particular aspect of the planet's dangers. Some were skilled hunters, others were expert builders of shelters designed to withstand storms and predation. Yet even their collective skills were stretched thin. Communities reported increasing fatalities, lost territories, and a creeping sense of despair. Elders who had lived through centuries of hardship were forced to witness their world unravel faster than they could comprehend. Young Deathworlders, raised in a culture of resilience, faced a terrifying realization that resilience alone might no longer be enough. They had fought countless natural disasters before, but now the odds seemed insurmountable. In human space, preparation for any response began quietly but methodically. Scientists worked to understand the Deathworld's ecosystem, its atmosphere, and its gravitational anomalies. Diplomats analyzed the alien language and social structure, trying to determine the best way to communicate and cooperate if intervention became necessary. Military planners assessed potential hazards, ranging from hostile wildlife to environmental dangers that could endanger human personnel. Engineers began brainstorming adaptive technologies, portable habitats, climate stabilizers, and defensive mechanisms tailored to a planet designed to kill anything that settled too long in one place. It was the beginning of what would become one of humanity's most daring and unprecedented missions, to send aid to a world that many assumed was destined for extinction. Throughout this period, humanity faced a mixture of excitement, fear, and moral urgency. For the first time, many realized that the universe was not just a collection of distant stars and planets, but a web of interconnected lives, each deserving of a chance to survive. The Deathworlders' message challenged humans to reconsider their place in the galaxy, not just as explorers and conquerors, but as potential protectors of life. The decision weighed heavily on leaders and citizens alike. Could humans cross the boundaries of caution and tradition to embrace a mission driven purely by compassion and duty, or would fear of the unknown prevent them from acting, leaving the entire civilization to vanish unnoticed? By the end of this phase, the stage was set for a monumental undertaking. Humanity was about to confront the unknown in its most extreme form, an alien world designed for death, a civilization on the brink, and the moral choice of whether to intervene at great risk. The message, simple yet profound, echoed through the minds of everyone who learned of it. Help, or lose us forever. It was a call that could not be ignored, and for many, it stirred a sense of purpose stronger than any fear. The human race, for all its curiosity and ambition, had never faced a challenge quite like this. The Deathworlder survival now depended not only on their own ingenuity but on the courage, empathy, and resolve of an entirely different species, a species that had the power to change the course of history with a single decision. Once humanity became aware of the Deathworlders' desperate plea, the situation quickly escalated from a distant curiosity into a major moral and strategic dilemma. On Earth, the news traveled like wildfire, sparking debates in political chambers, research institutes, and interstellar councils. Unlike typical scientific discoveries, this was not about mapping a new star system or analyzing an asteroid's composition. This was about life itself, an entire civilization hanging by a fragile thread. The message's content was simple yet chilling. The Deathworlders were facing imminent extinction. Their ecosystems were collapsing, storms were intensifying, and their fragile cities were crumbling. They were asking for help, not for advice or trade, but for direct intervention, a lifeline from a species more advanced and capable, humanity. To have never received such a plea, and it sparked both hope and fear. Among scientists, the reaction was one of urgency and fascination. The Deathworlders had survived on one of the most dangerous planets known, enduring generations of environmental extremes, predatory threats, and disease. Their ingenuity and survival had allowed them to persist against all odds. But the new threat was unprecedented. Natural disasters had grown larger and more destructive, far beyond their ability to manage. Predators were becoming more aggressive, likely driven by environmental shifts, and famine had begun to take hold in several regions. From a scientific perspective, this was a race against time. Every hour counted. Every delay could mean the loss of a civilization. Researchers ran simulations and projected outcomes, attempting to model scenarios that could stabilize the planet. But the complexity of the Deathworld made predictions difficult. The risks were immense, yet so was the moral imperative to act. The political landscape was far more complex. Earth's governing councils were split on the issue. Some leaders believed that humanity had an ethical responsibility to intervene. If humans possessed the technology, knowledge, and resources to save another intelligent species from extinction, how could they justify inaction? These leaders argued that moral courage and empathy were as important as strategic caution. They spoke of humanity's place in the galaxy, not just as explorers or colonizers, but as protectors of life. Allowing an entire civilization to vanish without offering assistance would be a stain on human history. Opposing voices warned of extreme risks. The Deathworld was unpredictable and deadly. Humanity had no experience with planets that were as hostile as this one. They worried that any expedition could result in catastrophic loss of human life. There were concerns about disease. Microorganisms on the Deathworld could be dangerous to humans, and vice versa. Some feared that intervening in alien affairs could destabilize galactic politics. Even a well-meaning rescue mission could be perceived as aggression by other nearby civilizations. Military strategists emphasized the need for caution. Sending a fleet into unknown territory was a gamble, one that could have irreversible consequences. Amid these debates, the Deathworld itself was deteriorating rapidly. Communications revealed more disturbing details. Crops were failing due to unpredictable weather patterns. Massive storms had destroyed sections of cities, and wild creatures were encroaching on areas where humans might eventually try to establish contact. The Deathworlders, who had once relied on their cleverness and adaptability, found themselves overpowered by circumstances they could not control. Entire communities were losing hope, while scientists among the Deathworlders struggled to find solutions that were now beyond their technological reach. Despite this, their message remained clear and urgent. They needed help, and fast. Back on Earth, experts began designing possible strategies. Initial proposals ranged from sending small reconnaissance teams to launching fully equipped rescue missions. Some suggested technological aid first, such as deploying automated machines to stabilize critical areas, while others argued for a full-scale human expedition. Engineers explored solutions like mobile shelters that could resist the Deathworld's extreme storms, protective suits that could withstand aggressive wildlife, and rapid deployment drones to monitor environmental changes and medical teams prepared for potential disease outbreaks, while scientists studied the alien physiology. To ensure any contact would be safe and effective, the ethical debate intensified as more details about the Deathworlders emerged. Humans realized that these aliens were not merely struggling for survival. They were intelligent, capable, and socially complex. Their society had deep cultural practices, traditions, and knowledge accumulated over centuries. The possibility of losing all that knowledge and history weighed heavily on policymakers. Some leaders even suggested that humanity's intervention could not only save lives, but also preserve the legacy of an entire civilization. The moral stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders themselves were growing increasingly desperate. Their attempts to stabilize cities and protect their people were failing at alarming rates. The storms that had once been manageable now destroyed entire districts. Food shortages were spreading, and disease became more prevalent as sanitation systems failed. Predatory creatures, emboldened by environmental chaos, attacked settlements more frequently. Even the most resilient individuals among the Deathworlders faced exhaustion and despair. They had no choice but to hope that the distant species they had reached out to humans would respond. Every day that passed without intervention was another day closer to extinction. As humanity prepared for possible action, teams worked tirelessly to simulate every potential scenario. They considered landing humans directly on the Deathworld, deploying automated machines first, and even creating hybrid solutions that combined both approaches. Every simulation accounted for extreme weather, aggressive wildlife, and the logistical challenges of operating in a hostile alien environment. Scientists and engineers collaborated with military strategists to ensure that any mission would be as safe and effective as possible. While the technical challenges were daunting, the moral weight of the situation gave urgency to every calculation and decision. Public opinion played a critical role as well. News of the Deathworlders' plight reached media channels, and people across Earth expressed a mixture of fear, curiosity, and empathy. Debates raged over social networks and public forums. Many citizens demanded action, insisting that humanity could not ignore such a clear call for help. Others worried about the risks, fearing that a failed mission could lead to massive human casualties. The discussions revealed a deeper truth. Humans were confronting not just a practical challenge, but a moral and emotional one. The idea of letting an entire intelligent species die, when it was within human power to help, became increasingly unacceptable to many. The tension between urgency and caution reached a peak when the first detailed scans of the Deathworld arrived. Images and sensor data revealed the extent of the devastation. Cities were half collapsed, large portions of land were submerged due to abnormal storms, and wildlife was encroaching upon areas that were once safely inhabited. Human analysts could see the struggles of the Deathworlders in stark detail, their ingenuity, their determination, and their vulnerability all visible through the lens of advanced sensors. The urgency was undeniable. Without immediate intervention, the Deathworlders would likely not survive the next few months. At this point, the question shifted from should we intervene to how can we intervene effectively. Military and scientific teams began coordinating on practical strategies. Mobile shelters capable of withstanding extreme storms were prioritized, along with protective technology to shield humans from the planet's dangerous fauna. Communication methods were developed to ensure humans could coordinate with the Deathworlders without causing panic or confusion. Medical teams prepared for the possibility of treating injuries from natural disasters, animal attacks, or disease. Engineers designed transport and supply systems that could navigate difficult terrain, from jagged mountains to flooded plains. Every team member understood that failure was not an option if the mission was to succeed. Despite the risks and the complexity, humanity began to take decisive steps toward action. The debate over ethics and danger slowly gave way to preparation and planning. It became clear that the moral imperative to act outweighed the fears of potential failure. Humanity had the power to make a difference, to prevent a civilization from vanishing entirely. And that realization spurred determination at every level of leadership and expertise. As preparations continued, time was critical. Every delay allowed environmental disasters to worsen, predator populations to grow, and starvation to spread. The Deathworlders situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted, reinforcing the urgency of the mission. Scientists, engineers, and strategists worked around the clock, running simulations, testing equipment, and preparing personnel for one of the most dangerous and complex missions humanity had ever attempted. In the midst of these preparations, the moral and emotional weight of the situation became increasingly apparent. Humanity was not simply planning a rescue mission, it was deciding whether it would act as a protector, a guardian, and a savior to a civilization it had never met. The choice would define humanity's role in the galaxy, testing not only technical skill but courage, empathy, and moral conviction. It was a test unlike any other, and failure was unthinkable. The challenge had crystallized. The Deathworlders were intelligent, desperate, and facing near-certain extinction. Humanity had the knowledge, technology, and capability to respond, but doing so required courage, ingenuity, and decisive action. The debate over whether to help had shifted into a race to plan and prepare. As every passing hour could mean life or death, humanity was on the verge of making history, not just as explorers or conquerors, but as a species willing to extend its hand across the stars to save lives it had never known. The stage was set for a monumental undertaking, one that would push humans to their limits and forever change the destiny of both species. The decision to respond to the Deathworlders' desperate plea was monumental, but making the choice was only the beginning. Once Earth's councils had authorized action, the scale of the undertaking became immediately clear. Humanity had committed to a mission that was unprecedented in the history of interstellar travel, sending a full fleet across light years of unpredictable space to a planet that was not only hostile to life but had a civilization teetering on the brink of extinction. The fleet would need to carry not just soldiers, engineers, and medical teams, but also a staggering array of technology specifically adapted for a world designed to kill anything that settled on its surface. Every detail had to be considered, from transport and supply chains to environmental shields and emergency shelters. The stakes were high, and the pressure on the mission planners was immense. As preparations progressed, excitement mingled with tension. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to adapt human technology to the unique challenges of the death world. Storms on this planet were far stronger and more unpredictable than any humans had previously encountered. Entire cities could be destroyed in a matter of hours. Engineers designed modular shelters capable of withstanding the strongest winds and heavy debris. Drones equipped with real-time sensors were programmed to scout and map safe routes, monitor wildlife, and alert rescue teams to sudden environmental hazards. Every tool, every piece of equipment, had to be resilient, flexible, and capable of functioning in an environment that seemed determined to resist human intervention. Medical teams faced equally daunting challenges. The Deathworlders' biology was entirely different from humans, and their diseases, though mostly harmless to humans, were often fatal to their own people. Doctors and biologists collaborated to develop medical kits that could treat injuries caused by extreme weather, predators, or environmental toxins. They also prepared for emergencies where humans themselves might be exposed to unknown pathogens. Ethical debates arose over whether it was safe to introduce human medicine to the Deathworlders, as even well-intentioned treatments could have unintended consequences. Nevertheless, the urgency of the mission demanded action. Lives were at stake, and delays could be fatal. Military strategists faced a different but equally critical challenge. The death world was filled with dangers that no human soldier had ever faced. Predators roamed freely, some capable of killing with terrifying speed, while the environment itself seemed almost alive. With earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and deadly storms appearing without warning, military planners had to design strategies that balanced defense with rescue and aid. Soldiers were trained to move in extreme conditions, protect civilians, and deploy emergency shelters rapidly. Advanced reconnaissance drones would help monitor threats, but human judgment would still be essential in moments of crisis. Every decision had to account for the unpredictable, the dangerous, and the entirely alien. Finally, the fleet departed. Hundreds of ships, each packed with personnel, supplies, and equipment, left Earth in coordinated waves. The journey itself was perilous, navigating the vast distances of space, avoiding natural anomalies like asteroid fields, gravitational distortions, and radiation storms required expert pilots and careful planning. Even minor miscalculations could result in disaster. As the fleet approached the death world, anticipation and tension reached a peak. Everyone on board knew that the fate of an entire civilization rested on their shoulders, and the enormity of that responsibility weighed heavily on every soul. When the fleet finally arrived, the sight was almost overwhelming. The The Death World rotated slowly beneath them, a beautiful yet terrifying sphere of constantly changing landscapes. Massive storms twisted across continents, rivers overflowed into cities, and large predators roamed the areas surrounding the settlements. Smoke and dust hung in the atmosphere, evidence of collapsed structures and fires that had raged unchecked. The fleet's sensors revealed panic among the Deathworlders, small figures moving frantically, attempting to rescue family members, livestock, and possessions. While struggling against both nature and their own predators, it was a scene of chaos, and the scale of the challenge became immediately apparent. Human teams quickly divided into specialized units. Engineers worked to stabilize critical infrastructure, constructing temporary shelters and reinforcing damaged buildings. Biologists and ecologists assessed environmental threats and worked to contain or redirect wildlife that threatened the death. Medical teams set up triage centers to treat injuries and prevent disease outbreaks, while soldiers established secure perimeters around vulnerable communities. Every action had to be coordinated, as delays or mistakes could result in catastrophic losses. The Deathworlders, initially wary of the massive human presence, observed carefully. Trust had to be earned, and time was in short supply. Communication with the Deathworlders proved to be both a challenge and a revelation. Despite language barriers, humans and aliens found ways to cooperate. Simple gestures, demonstrations, and technology-assisted translation allowed instructions to be understood. Humans quickly learned that the Deathworlders possessed extraordinary survival skills and knowledge of their environment. Their intimate understanding of local threats, from predator behavior to storm patterns, proved invaluable. By combining human technology and the Deathworlders' local expertise, the rescue effort became more effective. What began as a one-sided intervention gradually transformed into a collaboration, with both species working toward a shared goal of survival. The challenges were constant and relentless. Storms that had seemed manageable at first grew stronger, threatening to destroy newly established shelters. Predators, sensing increased human activity, attacked in larger numbers. Supply lines became strained, as drones and transport vehicles struggled to navigate the unpredictable terrain. Human leaders realized that success required flexibility, quick thinking, and the ability to adapt to the planet's dynamic conditions. Every decision, every movement, had to anticipate potential disasters before they struck. The fleet's commanders worked day and night, coordinating efforts, reallocating resources, and adjusting strategies in real time. Amid this chaos, small victories emerged. Communities that had been on the brink of collapse began to stabilize. Shelters held against storms, food distribution improved, and injured Deathworlders received critical medical care. The aliens, who had once been terrified of the massive human presence, began to trust the rescuers. They shared vital knowledge about their planet, showing humans hidden paths, safe zones, and areas of concentrated danger. Cooperation increased morale on both sides. Humans were inspired by the Deathworlders' resilience, and the aliens found hope in the presence of allies willing to risk everything for their survival. Despite these successes, critical moments continued to test the mission. A massive storm, larger than any recorded before, swept across a key settlement. Human and Deathworlder teams had to work together, racing against time to secure shelters, evacuate residents, and reinforce infrastructure. The storm lasted for hours, lashing the planet with winds and rain so violent that even the most advanced human technology was challenged. Lives hung in the balance. Yet through careful planning, courage, and sheer determination, the teams managed to save the majority of the population. The experience underscored the fragility of the mission, the strength of cooperation, and the stakes involved. Another critical moment occurred when a pack of predators, unusually coordinated and aggressive, attacked a recently stabilized community. Human soldiers and engineers had to act quickly to defend the settlement while ensuring the safety of civilians. Using a combination of technology, strategy, and guidance from the Deathworlders themselves, they successfully repelled the threat. The incident highlighted the unpredictability of the Deathworld and reinforced the lesson that humans and aliens working together could overcome even the most dangerous challenges. Each successful intervention built confidence, but every failure, no matter how small, was a stark reminder of the planet's hostility. Throughout this phase, the emotional weight of the mission was palpable. Humans on the fleet and the ground were continually exposed to suffering, danger, and uncertainty. They witnessed families torn apart, communities devastated, and individuals risking their lives to survive. The Deathworlders, in turn, experienced fear, relief, and growing trust in a species they had never known. Bonds formed in the most unlikely circumstances. Humans began to see the aliens not just as subjects of a rescue mission, but as fellow sentient beings deserving of care, respect, and protection. Likewise, the Deathworlders began to see humans not as invaders or outsiders, but as allies, partners, and lifelines in a moment of existential crisis. Humans had faced extreme weather, aggressive wildlife, and logistical nightmares, and yet they had persisted. The Deathworlders situation, while still dire, had begun to stabilize in areas where human intervention was effective. The collaboration between the two species had proven that, even in the face of overwhelming danger, unity and determination could achieve remarkable results. The challenges had been immense, the risks catastrophic, but the joint efforts had started to turn the tide. The stage was now set for the next phase of the mission, ensuring long-term survival, rebuilding communities and creating sustainable systems for the Deathworlders. The fleet's arrival had bought critical time. The immediate threats had been mitigated, and human ingenuity had proven adaptable to one of the most hostile planets ever encountered. Yet the experience had also shown that the Deathworld remained a formidable adversary. Every success was tempered by the knowledge that the planet would continue to challenge its inhabitants and their human allies. The mission had entered its most crucial phase, where resilience, innovation, and cooperation would determine whether an entire civilization could survive against staggering odds. After weeks of relentless struggle on the humanity and the Deathworlders began to see signs of hope. The initial chaos and desperation, which had seemed overwhelming, slowly gave way to coordinated action and tangible results. Every human team member, from soldiers to engineers to medics, had learned to adapt to the planet's unpredictable environment. They had mastered navigating jagged landscapes, extreme storms, and aggressive wildlife. Likewise, the Deathworlders, who had been terrified of the humans' size and technology at first, started to actively participate in planning and implementing survival strategies. It became clear that the solution to this near-extinction crisis would not come from human technology alone or from alien resilience alone, but from a combination of both. Together, they began the painstaking process of turning disaster into recovery. Engineers led much of the early effort to stabilize the temporary shelters, which had been quickly deployed during the first waves of storms, were expanded into larger semi-permanent structures, using a mix of human materials and local resources. These shelters were adapted to withstand not only the typical hazards of the planet, but also the extreme anomalies that occurred without warning. Some shelters floated on large bodies of water, anchored securely to prevent drifting during violent floods. Others were built into rocky cliffs or partially underground to shield them from storms and predatory attacks. Each structure was the product of collaboration. Humans provided advanced design and materials, while the Deathworlders contributed knowledge of the terrain, predator behavior, and environmental conditions that humans could not fully understand on their own. Biologists and environmental scientists played an equally important role. The Deathworld's ecosystem, which had long been hostile and unforgiving, had to be carefully managed to allow both humans and Deathworlders to survive safely. Researchers developed methods to redirect aggressive wildlife away from inhabited areas, without causing permanent damage to the natural balance. They stabilized water sources, introduced controlled food supplies, and treated areas of land that had been ravaged by storms or invasive predators. Humans had the technology to accelerate these processes, while the Deathworlders' intimate knowledge of local conditions ensured that interventions were effective and sustainable. Over time, regions that had been uninhabitable for years became safe zones where communities could rebuild. Medical teams faced another monumental challenge, but their progress was equally remarkable. The combination of human medical technology and the Deathworlders' natural remedies created a hybrid approach that dramatically reduced mortality rates. Injuries from environmental hazards, animal attacks, and previous starvation crises were treated with advanced surgical tools, vaccines, and local herbal remedies. Epidemics that had threatened entire communities were contained, and preventative measures were introduced to reduce future risk. Medical personnel trained local healers in human techniques, while learning from the Deathworlders' experience with endemic diseases and environmental hazards. The result was a healthcare system that neither species could have achieved alone, providing hope for survival and a foundation for a healthier future as infrastructure, environmental control, and healthcare improved. The psychological state of the Deathworlders also began to shift. Initially, fear, despair, and mistrust dominated their communities. They had faced disaster for generations and were deeply skeptical of outside assistance. But as shelters stood firm during storms, predators were successfully managed, and injured citizens received care. A sense of trust and hope began to take root. Small acts of heroism, whether a human soldier rescuing a trapped family or a Deathworlder guiding rescuers through treacherous terrain, became symbols of collaboration and mutual reliance. Communities began to cooperate not only with humans but also with neighboring settlements, sharing resources and knowledge in ways they had never done before. Education and training played a crucial role in this transformation. Humans taught advanced techniques for building, communication, and survival under extreme conditions. Deathworlders shared strategies honed over centuries for navigating storms, hunting for food safely, and predicting environmental threats. Workshops and training sessions became daily events, where both species learned from one another and developed confidence in their abilities to handle future challenges. By the end of this phase, what had once been a desperate and chaotic population had begun to evolve into a resilient, organized, and capable society, ready to face the Deathworld's dangers with new tools and knowledge. The turning point in this recovery came when humans and Deathworlders collaborated on a large-scale project to stabilize the planet's most dangerous regions. Using advanced monitoring drones and environmental engineering tools, they identified areas most susceptible to flooding, predator incursions, and storms. Engineers, soldiers, and Deathworlders worked together to construct massive protective barriers, irrigation channels, and predator containment systems. The process was painstaking and dangerous, often requiring work during storms or in areas with aggressive wildlife. But with each completed section, more land became safe for habitation and agriculture. Communities that had been isolated for generations were reconnected, trade routes reopened, and families reunited after long separations. Communication networks were established to coordinate these efforts across the planet. Humans deployed satellites and relay stations to maintain contact with teams operating in remote regions. Deathworlders adept at using natural landmarks and local cues, assisted in creating communication protocols that could withstand environmental disruption. These networks allowed rapid deployment of resources to areas in immediate danger, preventing further loss of life and accelerating the recovery process. The combination of human technology and Deathworlder knowledge made it possible to anticipate problems before they became disasters, a critical factor in saving countless lives. Economically, the planet began to stabilize as well. The Deathworlders' traditional methods of agriculture and resource management were enhanced with human technology. Crops that had once failed under extreme conditions now thrived in controlled environments. Water sources were purified and distributed efficiently, reducing conflict over scarce resources. Trade and resource sharing between communities created a sense of interdependence and stability that had not existed before. The Deathworlders, once focused purely on survival, could now begin to think about long-term sustainability and growth. Socially and culturally, the interaction between humans and Deathworlders had profound effects. Mutual respect grew as humans witnessed the aliens' ingenuity and resilience, and Deathworlders admired human adaptability, technology, and willingness to risk everything for their survival. Cultural exchanges, once limited to observation, became active collaborations. Storytelling, art, and shared traditions began to emerge, blending elements from both species. Festivals and ceremonies, originally meant to strengthen community bonds among Death, now included humans as participants, fostering unity and mutual understanding. The success of these efforts was not immediate, and not without setbacks. Storms occasionally damaged newly built shelters, predators adapted to human interventions in unexpected ways, and logistical problems sometimes delayed critical aid. Yet each challenge was met with ingenuity, patience, and persistence. Humans learned to work with the unpredictability of the planet rather than against it, and Deathworlders learned to trust in new methods without abandoning their own knowledge. Over time, this synergy created a resilient system capable of responding to crises efficiently, ensuring that future disasters would no longer threaten entire communities so severely. The planet had shifted from near-total chaos to controlled recovery. Communities were safe, communication networks were functioning, predators were contained, and medical crises were under control. The combined efforts of humans and Deathworlders had turned the tide, transforming a desperate situation into one of hope and possibility. The Deathworlders, once on the brink of extinction, could now envision a future where survival was not just a struggle, but a shared achievement and a foundation for prosperity. Humans, in turn, had gained an extraordinary understanding of a hostile alien world and the knowledge that their courage, empathy, and collaboration could make the impossible possible. The lessons of this phase extended beyond immediate survival. Both species had learned the value of cooperation, adaptability, and shared responsibility. Human technology had enabled survival where it would not have been possible alone, but the Deathworlders' knowledge and resilience had been equally crucial. This collaboration demonstrated that even the most hostile and deadly environments could be navigated successfully when different strengths were combined, and that empathy and moral courage were as important as skill and technology. The experience left a lasting mark on all involved. Humans returned to their ships, exhausted but fulfilled, knowing that they had prevented a tragedy of unparalleled scale. Deathworlders, once wary and fearful of outsiders, now trusted and respected humans, seeing them as partners rather than strangers. A foundation was established for future collaboration, education, and cultural exchange. The planet, once on the verge of collapse, now held the promise of recovery, growth, and enduring survival. The phase concluded with a sense of accomplishment tempered by humility. The challenges of the Deathworld were immense, but through determination, cooperation, and mutual respect, humanity and the Deathworlders had rewritten the narrative from one of inevitable extinction to one of possibility, hope, and shared achievement. The crisis had become an opportunity, the threat had become a lesson, and the bond between two very different species had become a testament to the power of unity and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The immediate crisis on the Deathworld had been averted, but the story of survival was far from over. As the storm clouds cleared and the dust settled, both humans and Deathworlders had the rare opportunity to reflect on the monumental events they had just endured. The relief of having survived was mixed with awe at what had been accomplished. Communities that had teetered on the edge of annihilation were now standing, resilient and ready to rebuild. The collaborative effort between humans and Deathworlders had not only saved lives but had fundamentally changed the relationship between the two species. What began as a desperate plea for help had evolved into a partnership that would shape the future of both worlds in profound ways. Humans, returning to their ships after months of intense work, carried with them more than just scientific data and environmental assessments. They carried experiences that had reshaped their understanding of survival, empathy, and interstellar responsibility. The Deathworld had tested every skill, every technological advancement, and every ethical principle they possessed. It had forced them to confront not only physical danger but the moral implications of intervention in another species' life. For many, the mission became a defining moment, a testament to humanity's capacity to act decisively and compassionately in the face of unimaginable danger. The memories of the relentless storms, the dangerous predators, and the incredible ingenuity of the Deathworlders stayed with them, leaving an indelible impression that would influence human thinking and policies for generations. The Deathworlders themselves were changed forever. Where fear, despair, and isolation had once dominated their society, hope, trust, and unity now took root. They had witnessed the lengths to which humans were willing to go to ensure their survival, and in turn, they had learned to see themselves not as victims of their planet but as capable participants in their own recovery. Their knowledge of the land, their strategies for survival, and their social cohesion had proved invaluable, and the confidence gained from successfully navigating the crisis with humans empowered them to approach the future with a renewed sense of purpose. Communities that had once struggled to survive day by day could now plan for long-term sustainability, education, and cultural development. One of the most profound outcomes of this mission was the trust and understanding established between the two species. Initially, the Deathworlders had viewed humans with a mixture of fear and awe. Humans were enormous, technologically advanced, and entirely alien, capable of feats that seemed godlike. Many feared that human intervention could bring unforeseen consequences, including domination, exploitation, or cultural erasure. But through the months of collaboration, those fears were gradually replaced by respect and appreciation. Humans had not imposed their will on the Deathworlders. They had worked alongside them, learning from them, adapting to their needs, and respecting their traditions. The result was a bond forged through shared struggle, mutual reliance, and the recognition that survival depended on partnership rather than dominance. This partnership extended beyond mere survival. Human engineers and scientists, impressed by the Deathworlders' ingenuity, began documenting their strategies, tools, and environmental knowledge. The Deathworlders, in turn, eagerly learned from human technology, medicine, and infrastructure systems. Educational programs were established, combining human expertise with Deathworlder experience to train future generations in skills necessary to maintain safety, sustainability, and prosperity. The exchange of knowledge became a cornerstone of the new relationship, ensuring that both species benefited from the collaboration and that the lessons learned from the crisis would endure long after the immediate danger had passed. Economically, the Deathworld began a slow but steady recovery. Human assistance in stabilizing agriculture, water distribution, and resource management had created a foundation for sustainable growth. Trade routes that had been destroyed by storms were restored, and communities previously isolated by environmental hazards were now able to interact, exchange goods, and share resources. The Deathworlders, once solely focused on survival, could now invest energy into development, innovation, and cultural pursuits. Human advisors worked with local leaders to establish systems that would maintain resilience against future disasters, while also preserving the unique characteristics of Deathworld society. The planet, once on the verge of collapse, began to flourish with a cautious but promising optimism, socially and culturally. The aftermath of the mission brought about a profound transformation. Humans and Deathworlders began to celebrate not only their survival but the collaboration that made it possible. Rituals, storytelling, and cultural expressions evolved to include shared experiences, blending elements of both civilizations. Children born after the crisis grew up learning the story of the great fleet that had arrived in their hour of need, and the generations that had witnessed the collaboration became storytellers, educators, and leaders, ensuring that the lessons of empathy, courage, and cooperation were passed down. This cultural integration strengthened bonds and created a foundation for long-term, interspecies understanding. Emotionally, the mission left lasting impressions on both humans and Death. The human participants had faced extraordinary danger, and many carried memories of near misses, heroic rescues, and moments of profound despair. Some struggled with the trauma of witnessing widespread devastation and suffering, yet many also found purpose and fulfillment in knowing they had made a tangible difference. The Deathworlders, too, experienced a mix of gratitude, relief, and renewed determination. Their perception of the universe expanded, recognizing that despite its dangers, there were allies willing to risk everything to preserve life. These emotional bonds reinforced the practical and cultural outcomes of the mission, creating a lasting sense of unity between the species. The broader implications of the mission extended beyond the immediate planet. Back on Earth, the success of the intervention became a defining moment in human interstellar policy. The mission demonstrated that it was possible to intervene ethically and effectively in the affairs of another species. Balancing caution with decisive action, policymakers, scientists, and citizens drew lessons about responsibility, empathy, and the potential for cooperation across unimaginable differences. The story of the Deathworld rescue spread throughout human colonies, inspiring future generations to embrace courage, innovation, and moral responsibility in the face of crises. The intervention became a case study in the power of collaboration, risk management, and ethical decision, shaping humanity's role in the galaxy for decades to come. The mission also influenced technological development. Innovations created for the Deathworld advanced shelters, environmental monitoring systems, adaptive medical technologies, and rapid response logistics were documented, improved, and later applied to other extreme environments across the galaxy. These technologies not only ensured the safety of future expeditions but also contributed to human settlements on hostile planets, making interstellar colonization safer and more sustainable. The challenges faced on the Deathworld acted as a catalyst for human creativity, resilience, and technological progress, proving that adversity often drives innovation. In reflecting on the aftermath, both humans and Deathworlders recognized that survival was only the first step. The long-term goal was to ensure that the planet would never again face existential threats on such a massive scale without preparation. Communities invested in environmental monitoring, disaster response systems, and education programs to teach future generations how to navigate the planet's dangers. Humans remained involved as advisors, trainers, and collaborators, but always with a focus on empowering the Deathworlders to manage their own affairs. This approach reinforced autonomy, respect, and self-reliance, while also maintaining the benefits of interspecies cooperation. Ethically and philosophically, the mission left a lasting impression on all involved. Humans confronted questions about responsibility, intervention, and the moral duty to assist others, while Deathworlders experienced firsthand the value of trust, cooperation, and openness to outside knowledge. Both species learned that strength alone was insufficient in the face of existential danger. Empathy, collaboration, and shared purpose were equally vital. The lessons of this crisis would resonate for generations, shaping not only policy and technology but the very way both species viewed themselves and the universe around them. As years passed, the Deathworld transformed from a nearly lost civilization into a thriving, resilient society. Cities rebuilt stronger than before, agricultural systems adapted to the environment, and communication networks connected once isolated communities. Humans maintained a presence as allies, mentors, and friends, but the Deathworlders gradually assumed full responsibility for managing their planet. They had learned to combine traditional survival strategies with human technology, creating a hybrid approach that ensured long-term safety and prosperity. What had begun as a desperate plea for aid became a model for interstellar cooperation and resilience, demonstrating the extraordinary outcomes possible when compassion meets courage. The emotional and cultural impact endured as well. Stories of the fleet's arrival, of heroic rescues, and of unlikely friendships were passed down through generations, becoming part of the collective memory of both species. Festivals, ceremonies, and educational programs commemorated the collaboration, ensuring that the lessons learned were never forgotten. Children and young adults, born after the crisis, grew up inspired by the courage and empathy displayed during the most challenging time in their history. They inherited not only a safer planet but a legacy of cooperation, resilience, and hope. Ultimately, the aftermath of the Deathworld crisis was a story of transformation. A civilization that had faced near-total annihilation emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than before. Humanity, too, had been transformed, gaining insight into the responsibilities and possibilities of interstellar existence. The mission proved that life, even in its most fragile and endangered forms, could be preserved through courage, empathy, and collaboration. It also demonstrated that the greatest achievements often arise from the most extreme challenges, and that the bonds forged through shared struggle can endure long after the immediate danger has passed. The story of the Deathworld rescue became a defining chapter in the history of both species, remembered not only for the lives saved but for the profound lessons learned. Humans and Deathworlders alike had discovered that survival was only the beginning. Thriving required trust, innovation, and mutual respect. The mission became a blueprint for future interstellar cooperation, a testament to the power of empathy, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and determination can create extraordinary outcomes. Both species emerged forever changed, bound together by a shared experience that proved the impossible could be achieved when courage, compassion, and collaboration were combined.